Well, for more on the impact of the pandemic fallout on the Latino community, let's bring in Fernando Menendez. He's an economist and joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So for people who aren't aware, what are we seeing in terms of COVID cases among Latino Americans?
Say again? I'm sorry?
In terms of the COVID cases, the rates that we're seeing in the Latin community in the U.S., what are we seeing right now?
It has, along with the rest of the population, it has been leveling off somewhat, but it hit the Latino communities particularly hard over the past year and a half.
So then how do vaccination efforts and rates also compare then to the rest of the U.S.?
Vaccination rates are lower, I would say. There is some hesitancy within the communities towards vaccines, which we see in other communities. For example, in the African American community, there was some initial hesitancy, but that also has begun to taper somewhat.
And in terms of how Latinos' economic situations have changed between the Great Recession and now, what are some of the trends that you've noticed?
Well, this has been particularly difficult. I think the pandemic has hit the Latino communities in a devastating way. You have 60 million folks in the United States who identify as Latino or Hispanic, about 18.5% of the population. It's a pan-ethnic community of Mexicans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, others. Median age is about 29 as compared to the rest of the country, 41 years of age. But Latinos have a higher labor participation rate than some of the other groups, and as a result, the younger population is helping to fund things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and VA programs. You take that, and then you realize that some 20% of that population earns poverty-level wages. Many are unskilled, many are semi-skilled, and when the pandemic hit, we saw unemployment rates of 18.9%, which have been quite devastating in certain industries, in farming and construction, in food and other services. That has had a very, very dramatic impact, and lockdown policies were very difficult to, well, they had a devastating effect, in fact, in the labor force.
So then as we look at job security and the financial well-being of Latinos of different backgrounds and in different areas of the country, what are you seeing there?
Well, we're seeing, obviously, it is a microcosm of the rest of the country. You know, I'm a Latino, I'm a professional, I can work from home, I can work with a computer. I have not been as affected as I would say some folks in other areas and other sectors. So you'd have to look at those different sectors. But at the same time, Latinos are also more likely to start their own businesses. But small businesses have had less cash on hand. So as the economy has constricted, it has had, again, another devastating effect on Latinos in the middle to lower sector of the economy who have small businesses.
And to that point, we did see that data from the National Research Center on Hispanic Children and Families showed that 60% of African American and Hispanic households had limited or no access to banks and were awarded a disproportionately small share of those PPP loans allocated for small businesses if they received anything at all. What needs to happen policy-wise to ensure fairer access to financial resources?
Well, there needs to be, I believe, greater levels of competition and greater level of access into markets. I don't believe that the solutions are necessarily top-down solutions. I don't believe that the solutions are necessarily a question of spending more money, because another factor that has to be taken into account is the surge in inflation. Inflation is having a devastating effect on people's savings. It's having a devastating effect, especially on the poorest. And we are seeing inflation strengthening. The Labor Department, the Commerce Department have all indicated that. So policies that allow folks to be entrepreneurial, policies that allow folks to enter into the workplace and enter into the workforce and promote incomes, absolutely. But policies where you are adding more fuel to the fire, I don't think is necessarily going to be helpful.
All right, we do appreciate your insights. Economist Fernando Menendez there.
Thank you, ma'am.